Awesome. Thank you, Jesus. Great. So yes, hello everyone. I'm Wesley Chun. I'm a developer advocate at Google, and today, I'm supposed to be talking about an image processing workflow, but that's really the marketing title of this talk. What I'm actually going to be showing you is an image archive analyst and report generation tool created with Google Cloud. Happy to take Q&A, as Jesus says, in Zoom. If we have time at the end, happy to entertain. But after the event, if you have additional questions, maybe a couple days down the line, feel free to check out this open Google Doc that I have. I entertain questions there. It's an open doc for everyone to see. So not only can you be sure you know that you're entering something in a public document, but you can also scroll back and see Q&A from other presentations I've done in the past. So, all right, without further ado, let's get going. So today's presentation is about, we can always talk technology as much as we want, but really the technology has an end goal, which is solving real life business problems. So I want to sort of expose that, as well as introduce you to, some of the products that we have in Google Cloud. Particularly two of our product groups, the cloud platform as well as Workspace, which most people know as the collection of Gmail, Google Drive, Calendar, Doc Sheets, and Slides. Many people, of course, know the cloud platform for all of our virtual machines and big disk and data processing and analytics, as well as machine learning services. And then people also know Workspace for all those applications that I told you about. But it's also for developers, as I'll show you. And what's interesting is that we're going to try and use both products from both product groups together at the same time to build interesting solutions to solve unique business problems. And I'm taking a look at one particular case study. So anyway, yeah, so what we're going to do is we're going to start off with a high-level introduction to Google APIs in general, not just cloud, but all of them. And in between that and wrapping up, I'm going to, of course, introduce you next to all of the cloud APIs, especially the ones we're going to work with. And then, of course, the main reason why you're here is to show you this specific workflow app, and then maybe give you some additional inspiration as to what else you can do if you actually use products from both product groups. All right, so a little background about myself. As a developer advocate, my main goal is to enable all current and future developers everywhere to be successful using Google Cloud and other Google developer tools and APIs. I'm currently focused on our serverless tools, which I'm not actually going to be talking about this morning, App Engine, Cloud Functions, and Cloud Run. But I do also focus on higher education, which is why the and future is bolded up there. Workspace, which we will be talking about, our machine learning APIs in Google Cloud, which I will be talking about as well. And then, of course, multi-product use cases, which is definitely what we're going to be covering today. My background is I've been a software engineer for several decades. I worked for several large companies you're probably familiar with. Probably the most well-known thing I worked on, I was one of the original engineers that built Yahoo Mail about 20 some odd years ago. I teach outside of work and actually have a longer teaching career than as an engineer, and I'm a member of the Python community. All right, so that's enough about me. Why are you here? Well, to learn a little bit about how to use Google APIs, perhaps to solve some of the problems in your organization or for your customers. Okay, first thing is pretty easy, which is, when you think of Google, you're probably thinking of a lot of our well-known, public-facing products like the search engine, Chrome, Android, YouTube, and of course, Workspace, which is a collection of all those well-known apps that you see above. But Google is more than that, and you can't wait for us to write every single app on the planet for you. So we want to empower users everywhere to be successful, including small businesses, large enterprises, hobbyists. So what we've done is we've taken a lot of our technologies and we've added sort of like developer endpoints and APIs so that you can use our technologies without having to reinvent things from scratch. Like, who wants to go and reinvent Google Maps from scratch? It's not really easy to do, and we've put in a lot of research and hours to actually produce a well-known service. So anyway, the main idea behind the APIs is Again, not for you to wait for Google to write every single app that you want to use, but for you to use the technologies that we've made available when you're building your next web app or your next mobile app, or more than likely both. All right, and so, for those of you who are new, this is sort of like a very high-level overview as to how you would generally use our APIs if you've never used them before. So the first step is you would go to the Cloud Console, and I'm going to show you what this looks like over the next couple of slides. Of course, you will log into your Google or your Gmail account. Yeah, so it could be a corporate Google account, Workspace account, or it could be your personal consumer Gmail account. You create a project. You enable which APIs you want to use. You may have to turn on billing. For our case, we are going to have to turn on billing. I mean, I'm not going to show you how to do it, but the reason is because we're using, cloud platform. So I have a little bit on pricing, as you can see in the sidebar to the right. After you turn on billing, you'll download any requisite client libraries you're going to use. Then you have to create and download your credentials, because all of our APIs require some sort of credential. You write your application and then you run it. And if you are selling it or making it available to other users, they may need to authorize your application to get access to their data. All right, so that's roughly how you would use our APIs. Now, as far as costs go, Cloud Platform charges on a pay-per-use basis. So it's just like, your water bill, your electricity bill. For every little bit you use, you get billed for it. But don't worry about it. I'll talk about the free stuff in a moment. Workspace is a little bit different. So in order for your company to use, Gmail, Google Drive, Calendar, Doc Sheets, and Slide, there's a monthly subscription, and that subscription actually covers for your API usage. So as far as you're concerned, using Workspace APIs is free, up to a certain limit. And as far as the cloud platform goes, we have a free trial. So if you're absolutely brand new, we give you $300 to start with. You have 90 days to use it. It does require a credit card, and when you're done with the 1 quarter or you're done with the $300, then you can turn it over to the next financial instrument, which would be your credit card or other types of billing. We support different types of billing depending on where you're located. There's also a always free tier. So the always free tier is basically this. I wouldn't say most, but a good number of common or popular cloud platform tools have a free daily or monthly quota. And you have to actually exceed that quota in order to incur billing. If you don't, you'll never see a bill at all. So to learn more about the free trial or the free tier, feel free to go and hit that link down there. All right, so let us move on. All right, so now let's talk about the Cloud Console, because this is sort of like where all the actions, all the action takes place. Let me fix something on my computer here. Hold on a second. Shoot. Hit the wrong thing. Okay, so in the Cloud Console, there are on the left nav is sort of some interesting things that I want to point out. So the link is there to access the Cloud Console. First thing I want you to notice is that first major section that you'll see in the left nav is our product listings. So you go and sort of, these are the settings for all the products you wish to use. Of course, it's not just 10. This thing actually scrolls well down below this slide. So you can't see it, but it goes on for quite a bit. So that's why we give you the ability to pin common things that you use up at the top that you need to access, like the API manager, and other things like that. In fact, the next one is going to be billing. So let me point that out. So yeah, so this is where you control, the credit card and all that kind of stuff. If you're working on a project with other people, the Identity Access Management, or IAM, and admin page will let you add other users to your project. So for every application, you need a project, and every project needs a billing account. But if you're going to be collaborating with other people, this is where you add them, and then you add what, you specify what the roles are. Do they have view only role? Are they also an editor? Or are they an owner? So lots of different options there. And then lastly, the last big section I want to talk about is up here. This is the API manager, which I will show you on the very next slide. So These are the 4 major sections of the Cloud Console that you should be familiar with when you get started. All right, so when you click on, the API manager, you get brought to this page, or you can also use this shortcut link to go straight to here without having to go through the front page of the Cloud Console. So this one I think is most important to me as a developer because this is where I control which APIs I use. Yeah, so just to give you an idea of what's on this page, there are 3 major sections to the developer console. The first is a dashboard, so that's the page that you're looking at here. So this tells you a little bit of information about your application statistics and things like that. So first, it tells you how much traffic are you getting in this application. How busy is it? How many users are hitting your app every second? Also, how many errors is your app generating? And then what is the average response time to your users? And then down below is a list of all the different APIs that you've enabled. So the thing is that we don't enable all APIs by default because there's just way too many Google APIs, and it's too much resources to have them all enabled by default. So you have to go and pick and choose which ones you want to use, and you flip them on and off like a light switch. So yeah, so that is the second tab, which I'm not going to show you, but it's here. So when you press on library, you get an empty search bar. I heard that Google was a search company. No, but really, there's just too many APIs. So for any APIs that you wish to use, you just start typing the name or description of what you're looking for, and it brings up anything that matches. And then for the ones that you're interested in, you just click on them, and then there's an enable button. You click on that, and then you wait for the gears to spin for a couple of seconds, and then it tells you, hey, it's enabled. And then it will show up in this list once you go back to the dashboard. And then lastly, the final tab is for creating your application credentials, which you do need to use in order to access our APIs. Let me check on one thing really quickly here. Okay, great. So yeah, oh, by the way, anytime you see a blue box like this, that means I made a video on it because this topic is a lot deeper than I can go into in a particular session like this. So go and check out the video when you get a chance. Also, I'll provide the slide deck for you at the end, so you don't need to take pictures of everything, unless you're really desperate and want to open the tab to it right now. All right, so that is the developer console. So as far as what kind of credentials that you would create, okay, so back to the credentials tab for just a moment. When you click on this, you get a page that lists all your credentials for your project, and then up at the top is a button that says create credentials. And when you press that, it's going to ask you what kind you want to create. So you have to make a decision. So I need to tell you what it is, what your choices are, right? So the first one is for simple access. The credential is called an API key, and generally this is only for APIs that you're accessing public data. So in other words, searching for a location on Google Maps, which is a public location, searching for YouTube videos, which is public, and then some cloud platform products like I'm uploading an image to the Cloud Vision API, or I am sending a sentence of text to the natural language API. Those are all considered public information, and so you only need an API key to access those. Okay? Everything else is authorized because the data belongs to something or somebody. So the first one is the OAuth client ID. That is where you're trying to access data that's owned by a human user. So for example, somebody's files on Google Drive or somebody's spreadsheet, it's owned by a human user, and so that user needs to grant permission to your app to access their data, whether it's reading or writing. And similarly, with YouTube, YouTube, obviously since the videos themselves are public, so you can use an API key, but maybe you want to add something to somebody's YouTube playlist, or maybe you want to access, a YouTube channel's statistics. Those things are owned by a human user, and so you need to have authorized access to that. And then some cloud platform stuff like somebody's, Google Cloud Storage or whatnot. So some cloud platform stuff is owned by human users. However, most cloud platform stuff is actually owned by an application or a robot user, and in that case, you need to have a service account. So this is the predominant type of credential type if you're using cloud platform. Mostly, it's going to be cloud oriented. All right, so those are the main 3, okay? So now that you know which ones they are, depending on which API, you'll have a much better idea as to which type of credential you need. Sometimes you create the wrong one, that's fine. You can always, delete it or start over. It's not an issue. Okay, so in order to talk to an API, it's always easiest to use a client library. We have two types. I'm going to be doing my demos in Python, but I wanted to show you on this slide that we support most common developer languages today. All right, so if you don't know Python, that's fine. Just pretend, what you see on screen is pseudocode because Python takes the least amount of code. It's very expressive. And a lot of people consider Python to be executable pseudocode anyway. So we have two types of client libraries. This is the next important thing I want to tell you. We have the lower level platform style client libraries, and then we have the higher level product level client libraries. And today we're going to be using the lower level one just because I'll tell you why in just a moment, but I just wanted you to be aware that there's two different types. And so why are there two different types? So that's coming up. Okay, so before that, I also want to mention that all of these client libraries are open source because Google believes in having an open cloud. And of course, open source we think is best for industry as a whole. In fact, we've signed strategic agreements with some very well-known leading open source centric or even open data centric organizations to integrate their services into our cloud. So you can read more about it at our announcements here. And then we also have a specific blog dedicated to open source, things like that. All right, so why are there two different styles of client libraries? The platform ones are lower level and they support multiple products because they're kind of like a lowest common denominator. If you are trying to work with multiple APIs across different Google product groups that may not be related to each other, such as Workspace and Cloud Platform, they're kind of different, or maybe you want to use Google Analytics or YouTube APIs. Right, if you want to use all of these, they talk one type of language. That's lower level stuff. However, if you're only going to use cloud or you're only going to use maps, then you can use the product level client libraries because they're higher level and they're easier to use, and they hide a good amount of the security code. With the platform level libraries, you have to write, I wouldn't say a lot of security code, but you have to write sort of like the basic stuff. Whereas with the product level client libraries, there's very little security code you need to write. All of it is kind of been pushed under the layers and abstracted out to all these client libraries. So we generally suggest that you use both, but today we're going to do the lower level one because we're going to use Workspace APIs as well as GCP APIs. All right, and then some API families support both, just like Cloud. All right, awesome. So a little bit about how our APIs work. So very much of a request response workflow. You write your application using Google APIs. You run the code. It makes an HTTP call to our services. You have to get past security. You have to have the right credentials. Once that has been confirmed, the API does whatever service you requested, and then it sends the response back to your application. Very much of a client-server model. Okay, so with that said, let's jump straight into Google Cloud because we are running short on time. So Google Cloud is an organization I work for. We have, again, two well-known product groups, the Cloud Platform as well as Workspace. A lot of people, we're going to spend most of our time talking about Cloud Platform, but we also going to be using Workspace quite a bit. So it's a lot of people think, oh my gosh, Cloud Platform, yeah, that's where all the VMs are. It's all for developers and things like that. And Workspace, oh, that's all for users because it's got applications like Gmail and Google Drive and Docsheet Slides. But what a lot of people don't know is that Workspace is also for developers, because behind each of these well-known applications that you may have used or are using, there is a developer API behind them. That's what this little symbol is. Anytime you see this, this just means there's some kind of API. But we also have a serverless platform called AppScript, and we don't have time to talk about that too much today. I will mention it maybe barely briefly. But yeah, it's a way to code Workspace and other Google APIs and services without thinking about APIs or HTTP or OAuth or anything like that. It's a little higher level. It's generally for like the business developer, the data analyst. You basically use objects to talk to our APIs instead of the normal traditional API calls and things like that. All right, so Cloud Platform and Workspace fit into the general overall cloud computing service levels diagram that I have here. So as you know, most of you know, cloud computing is divided up into three major service levels. We have SaaS, which is software as a service, And down at the bottom, we have infrastructure as a service, which is hardware. So SaaS is basically applications that are available online. Anytime you need a web browser to log into something or a mobile app, you're probably using a SaaS application. If you're trying to rent virtual machines and big disk, that's probably infrastructure as a service. And then in the middle is platform as a service, which is you write the code, you upload it to these services, and they run them for you. And so where you kind of divide workspace versus cloud platform is anything that's remotely SaaS flavored is going to belong to Workspace, because Gmail and Google Drive and Docsheet Slides, they are all SaaS apps, right? And then everything else below that belongs to the cloud platform, which sort of makes sense. All right, so let's give you your first code to look at. So this is looking at the first 100 files or folders in your Google Drive. Now, if you're in person, I'm going to ask you to raise your hands. How many people think that this is going to use API keys, or is this simple API access, or is this authorized API access? Who does this stuff belong to? And everybody would raise their hands when I say, does this belong? Is this public data or is it private data? You would say it's private data because this typically belongs to a user. So we do need to have authorized access. And because files and folders in Google Drive generally belong to a person or a human, we will be using OAuth client IDs. So you would be actually creating those types of credentials. So let me walk you through this application, which, believe it or not, is very short. It's only 4 lines long. It's only the 4 bolded lines here. That is the entire application to list your first 100 files and folders in your drive. Everything else is extra. So we have all the imports at the top. So no matter what language you use, there's going to be imports. And then in the middle is all the security code. So again, the users who owns this drive needs to give your application, this code, permission to access their files and folders, even if it's in a read-only fashion. So I don't know if some of you have seen this, but sometimes when you run an app for the first time, you'll see this window, little small window that pops up that says, this application needs your permission to. And so what this is going to do is this converts to this thing that looks like a URL. It converts to the little message in that box that says, this user or this application needs access to check out the files and folder names on your Google Drive, yes or no. And so when you click accept, it goes through and you have valid credentials, and then the application can run. So here on the first line, you're going to be creating an endpoint to the Drive API. And then you're going to use the list method in the files collection to say, give me the first 100 files and folders. Of course, 100 is the default. In here, you could say something like max results equals maybe 25 if you don't want to show 100. But we're going to take the default because that means less code. So we're going to execute this request, and we're going to look at the payload, and we're going to pull out the file's results. And then we're going to do a for loop through each file. Then we're going to put the name and file of that file. And that's really it. This is as basic as it can get. So yeah, it doesn't really take too many lines of code to get going with an application like this. And if you want to learn more, there's a video on this. But I'm going to give you a demo like this and show you the 4 different APIs we're going to use for our workflow application. So that's why I'm doing this, not to kind of like belabor you with long stuff. All right, so that is this. Then we're going to move, the next part is we're going to be doing spreadsheet stuff. So this is just an example of how you can use the Google Sheets API to move some SQL data into a spreadsheet. So you may have something sitting in a relational database. In this case, it's basically a toy order status database. I'm going to select all the rows, which includes all these column names, which I'm going to actually insert into my set of rows because I actually want the column names inserted as the first row into my spreadsheet. So that's why I add it in front of all my data by adding it to row 0 or as row 0. Then the next couple of lines of code creates a blank spreadsheet called customer orders. And after it's done creating that spreadsheet for me, I want the ID because I need that ID in order to write into it. And then the last line of code takes that ID, says, I want to start writing data into cell A1, which is in the upper left corner. Here are all my rows of data, and then execute that, and boom, you're done. So there's a video on that one as well. The next one is Google Cloud Storage. So this is our large data lake in the sky. So this is your big blobs. So it's quite different from Drive. It has files and folders and your documents for collaboration. Cloud storage is like big disk, big blobs, amorphous binary data. So we're going to use this one as well too. So in this case, I'm going to create an endpoint to the cloud storage API, and then I'm going to, this just lists what different buckets you have available. So that's it. So it's very similar to the drive example, but all your file buckets. All right, and then the last API we're going to use is the Cloud Vision API, which is a machine learning API that can analyze the contents of a photo. So I'm going to show you a quick demo how to use this, which is using this image, which is available online. I want to do label detection and face detection on this image. And here, again, I'm going to create an endpoint to the Vision API. Since this is just a photo and I'm not looking at private data, I only need an API key. So that's why this doesn't ask for any OAuth permissions. All right, so then I make the call to the Vision API to get that data. I pull out the responses, and then I loop through all the objects that the API sees in the image, as well as any kind of facial annotations. So here is the image. These are the things that it sees, as well as a confidence score or likelihood that this object is in this photo, and then some facial features, of which Joy is the only one that shows up. So if you want to learn more about the Cloud Vision API, here's a short link to take you to a free online tutorial. Only takes about half hour, and you learn to use 4 different features of the Vision API. All right, so now that you've got the underlying baseline, why are you here? The main idea is I can use all 4 of these technologies together in a meaningful way. So this imagines that you're in manufacturing or the media or advertising or architecture. You may be wondering, like, what do these industries all have in common with each other? And the one big thing is there's a lot of image assets. So much that if you are a Google Workspace user, you'll have images and folders with images everywhere in your Google Drive. And it's difficult to navigate because when you bring up your drive, it shows all the folders first. And if you have 10,000 pages of folders, it's going to take a long time for you to get to your files. And so your Google Drive ends up looking like this over the years. And so that's not good. So we want to basically archive the data, especially after a project or an advertising deal is done. You're not going to look at those as much anymore. So you really should be archiving that to, storage that you're not using on an everyday basis like Drive. So I contend that cloud storage is perfect for this because we have colder storage, and the colder the storage, which is the the less you access the storage, the cheaper it is. So it's a great place to put all the data that you're not really accessing much. And since I'm going to store the data, why don't I analyze it so I can search for them later, right? So that's why we're going to use the Cloud Vision API, because that tells us what's in the image. And so if we take that maybe the top 5 labels, we have a good idea as to what is in this image. All right, and then to sum everything up, if I'm backing everything up, I just don't want to throw it all in there and have it disappear forever. I actually want to take a look and figure out what things are. I want to search for them. So it'd be great if I could just get them all into a spreadsheet so I could see what the images are, what the names are, maybe a link. So that will take me directly to where that image is located on cloud storage, and then some other information about the type of file, timestamp, and things like that. So anyway, so that's the application, and it works something like the following. From Google Drive, I want to back up this image to cloud storage. And in the meantime, I also want a Cloud Vision to analyze it. And then I want to record the locations as well as the output from Cloud Vision into a spreadsheet. So that's basically how this application works. So I'm not going to go through all of it because we're running a little short on time, but the main idea is here I am creating endpoints to all 4 APIs here. This is my same security code that you saw earlier in Google Drive, and these are the permissions that are going to show up in that little box that your user is going to see. And then what's going to happen is 4 different functions, each talking to each API, and then there's going to be a main driver. So just kind of like going through these really fast. To download a file from Drive, I first search for it. So you only need to look at the things in bold, by the way. So we need to search for the file. Once we have the file, then we could say, let's download the binary for that, and then return the binary blob along with the timestamp and the MIME type, then pass that over to cloud storage where I want to upload that and insert that object into cloud storage. And then I want to send that data, that binary data, over to Cloud Vision to analyze and tell us what's in that image. And then lastly, I want to get all the data returned and write that into a row in the spreadsheet. And here is the main driver, the first one that calls Google Drive. Then I upload it to cloud storage. Then I call Cloud Vision to analyze the data. Then I write all the return values from all of those into a row in the sheet. If we have, 20 seconds at the end of this talk, then I'll show you a live demo of it. But if you want to learn more about it, there's a blog post here. There's a code lab, which is a hands-on tutorial for you to build it line by line, and then a link to the repo if you want to go straight to the code. All right. So I think we only have time for one inspirational story, and then I'm going to wrap up. So the one of my colleagues wrote an app that analyzes or adds custom intelligence to Gmail by analyzing Workspace data with GCP. So what did he do? He says, oh my gosh, I get a lot of email. Gmail does a great job of filtering the spam, but even with the non-spam, I only care about certain messages, which are ones that have pictures of birds in them. And so what did he do? He wrote an app such that every time he got a message in Gmail, it would fire off a message to Cloud PubSub, which is our message queue service, like Apache Kafka, if you're used to that. That triggers a Google Cloud function, which will take that message, extract all the attachments, sends it to Cloud Vision, checks to see whether bird is one of the labels that comes back, and if so, it stars that message so that without running any code explicitly, the next time he logs into his Gmail, some of his messages will be starred because they have pictures of birds in that email. So anyway, if you want to learn more about this, there's a blog post as well as access to the source code. Okay, so that is it. So wrapping up, Google is more than just apps, right? We're more than all these well-known apps that you're used to using. A lot of our technology is available to developers using our APIs. So Workspace is not just productivity apps. You can code them too. And of course, you know about Cloud Platform. And it's kind of great if you can use some of these services together to build, our sample lab used 4 of these services to build a unique solution. You can do lots of interesting things if you use them both together. Other Google products and APIs that you could consider are listed here. And more documentation for you to look at. And finally, the most important slide is the slides. So here's the PDF for the slides. There's also a blog post that you can look at that describes this sample app. Here's the code lab again to build it line by line. And if you notice the progress bars down at the bottom, that is AppScript. And because neither PowerPoint nor Google Slides actually has progress bars, so one of my colleagues built it by using AppScript. And my daughter says hello. And I am going to say thank you very much.